And ladies and gentlemen, please give Mr. Alistair Routledge a warm welcome.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to join you this evening. There were a few of us came on the British Airways flight from Guyana on Monday, overnight Monday, landed yesterday morning, and of course, it's a fantastic. You laid on the best reception as far as weather is concerned. It's perfect. So thank you for that welcome. As Riyadh was kind enough to do in his introductory remarks, he let you know that I am indeed British myself. Although some of you may notice I wear a Guyanese flag pin on my lapel. And I've been in Guyana now for 3 years, and this gets closer and closer to my heart all the time. I think I'm becoming an adopted Guyanese. But to Riyadh's point, this is an outstanding, remarkable story, I would say, in our industry. And so it's an honor, and it's very exciting for me in my career to be a part of it. And although Riyadh said that, very kind things about me, I just feel that I was lucky to arrive when I did, and to have such a wonderful team of people that I work with. And that now includes over 150 Guyanese employees that ExxonMobil has in Guyana, who reflect the diversity of the Guyanese population, including more than 50% of that, the employees being female, which in my experience is quite remarkable in our industry, that we've been able to start an organization with such a great balance and representation. So let me now share a few remarks and some pictures. I always feel some pictures, they're not intended to be a big presentation, but they add 1,000 words and can stop me for talking for 2 hours, which I'm sure you'll all appreciate. But Riyadh did the first part of decoding our industry when he talked about a floating production, storage and offloading vessel. And this is in essence the island in the ocean that is the facility through which we produce the oil and gas and the other fluids that come up from the reservoirs, separate them all, store oil, discharge it into carriers, crude cargo carriers, to dispatch to markets around the world, including the UK, which is behind some of those statistics we heard about now the trade between Guyana and the UK. And then we re-inject gas into the reservoirs and use some of that as fuel on board. So this picture that you see in front of you is the second FPSO that we installed in Guyana in 2021 and started up last year in 2022. This is a purpose-built facility. It can store up to around 2 million barrels of oil. And just to give you a sense of the scale, this is about 3 football pitches long in length, over 300 meters long. And if you look very closely on that helideck that's in the foreground, you'll see a man in the foreground. He looks tiny on there, but that just gives you a sense of the scale of these facilities. When I talk a little later on about the sort of investment numbers that we have into Guyana, just to give you a sense, one of these FPSOs of this sort of scale is $2, $3, $4 billion, depending as we progress. We're making them a little bigger and more complicated for good reason that I'll talk about. But they probably only represent about 30 to 40% of the investment in one project. The rest is below the sea. We operate in about 1,500 meters or a mile deep water or deeper, which when I started my career in Aberdeen in 1990, we couldn't do. We didn't have the technology to do. So for many reasons, this is Guyana's time, this is Guyana's hour, and that includes the development of technology to enable us to do what we're doing in Guyana. So let me talk a little more now about that partnership. What does it mean? And the first part of that is I just want to introduce ExxonMobil because often we as employees of ExxonMobil go around the world and we just assume, well, everybody knows who ExxonMobil is. But I remember dearly, my previous role, as mentioned, I worked in Qatar. And one of the fun things that I got to do there is we sponsored the annual tennis tournament. So I got to meet tennis players, but I also got to meet some other interesting people. And one time I sat next to David Beckham, who'd come to watch the tennis and do deals. I don't know what all deals he did on the football side. But I sat and I asked David Beckham, I said, so do you know who ExxonMobil is? And he shook his head. He didn't know. Now, some of that is down to the confusing brands that we have, because some will know Exxon is only a brand that's really used for gasoline stations or petrol stations in the US. Here in the UK, we call it Esso. Mobil is also a brand, and we've had Mobil gas stations or fuel stations, but you'll know Mobil 1 as a lubricant. You know, so in amongst the name of ExxonMobil, there are many brands that have been wrapped up. The other way to think about it is we're a petroleum and a chemicals company. We are, if you will probably know the name Shell or BP, we're a little bit bigger than either of them. We're the largest publicly traded petroleum and chemicals company in the world, with around 62,000 employees around the world. So as you hear, 150 in Guyana is just a start, but part of a huge family around the world, from some 160 countries around the world. So a very, although US-based and quoted international company, we are in fact a very international company. I'm very happy to be part of it. It's given myself and my family great opportunities to travel around the world and be involved in exciting projects like what's happening in Guyana. Now, some would also say, well, you're one of these dirty oil and gas companies, what's the future? Well, we do see ourselves as part of the energy future, part of that energy transition. We've established a low carbon solutions business as part of our corporate structure that will include investments in the hydrogen economy, carbon capture, sequestration, biofuels, and the like. So leveraging a lot of the same skills and knowledge that we have today. So we intend to be around for a long time, and we believe that this needs to be a managed transition, and it's an and equation. We need to have security and affordability of energy, but we also need to take care of the environment and transition to a future where we are net zero. So enough about ExxonMobil, and let's talk about Guyana. I imagine some of you know that it's actually been a long history looking for oil and gas in Guyana, going back decades. But it wasn't until, well, in fact, 1999, the original agreement for the Starbroek block was signed, and we'll look at the Starbroek block shortly. But that was the agreement that brought ExxonMobil and Shell into the country to be part of that journey of exploring for hydrocarbons in the country. Now, traces had been found in the past, but nothing ever economic, neither onshore nor offshore. There were a number of issues, as you can imagine, over that time frame of border issues that caused force majeure and delays in the progress of data acquisition and exploration. But finally, in 2015, ExxonMobil drilled the first well, the first exploration well in the Starbroek block. Now, unfortunately, by that time we had lost our partner, Shell. Shell in 2014 had looked at all the data and looked at their opportunities around the world and said, we think this is too risky. We're not in. We're going to take our capital. We're going to leave you to it. The board of ExxonMobil said, this is pretty risky. We believe in it, but we'd like to spread the risk. We'd like to have a partner or two. So as a company, we went out looking, and we canvassed and looked at, I think, 30 plus companies. Two of them believed in this opportunity. That was the Hess Corporation and CNOOC, the Chinese national oil company. And so they joined us just before we drilled that first well, which came to fruition in May of 2015 when we struck oil. And I've actually spoken to the drilling superintendent who was in country at the time. And he was told when he came over, he was working in Africa, and he was asked to come over to Guyana to run the drilling operation. He said, He was told, look, we have this obligation well to drill. You need to come in, just run that drilling operation. It'll be one well and then we'll be done. You know, we'll pack up the rig and we'll go. Well, that rig is still there. In fact, we have 6 drilling rigs because that well was exceptionally successful. And he said to me, he described how with disbelief, the way we drill is you pump drilling mud down through the center of the drill pipe, comes up through the annulus and brings back the rock cuttings from down in the rocks below. Well, as you're bringing back the rock cuttings, if you find oil, you start to see oil in the mud. And they started to see that in the returns. And there was, oh, we didn't expect that. And then they kept drilling and they kept finding more and more. And in fact, it was, and to date, remains the largest discovery that we've made in Guyana, the Liza field. So great success after many decades of searching for oil in the country. So what is the Starbroek block? It's a very large block in oil and gas terms. It stretches from the Suriname border in the east to the Venezuela border in the west. Where we are operating is around 200 kilometers offshore, so well away from what we can see from onshore. As I said, in some 1,500 meters of water. In fact, we've drilled wells up to just short of 3,000 meters of water depth. Now, at 3,000 meters, that's 300 bar pressure. It's an immense pressure. You can't operate with divers. So when I started my career in the North Sea, we were still using divers. We were in about 100, 120 meters of water. So the equipment where we needed that dexterity, we could still use divers that would go down and they would be able to operate equipment on the seabed. Not in these water depths. So what's happened over the decades since is that technology to be able to put down equipment, operate it remotely with what's called remote operating vehicles has been developed and proven and taken down to deeper and deeper depths, which has really unlocked that potential. We've also developed seismic capabilities, 3D seismic. In fact, now we call 4D seismic, so four-dimensional. The fourth dimension is time. So we're able to look at the rocks and indeed even the fluids in the rocks over time and see how those fluids are moving in the rocks. So tremendous technology advances that are helping us to unlock the potential in Guyana. So since that first success in 2015, really a very remarkable pace that by December of 2019, that first production started from the Liza field through the Destiny FPSO, a tanker conversion. That was the quickest way to deliver first production. Very much aligned in that vision with the government at the time, that they wanted to see first production as quickly as possible so the country could start to deliver the benefits, and also so that we could start to, if you like, finance the ongoing development from the country's own revenue streams. Since that time, we now have sanctioned some 5 major developments. So Liza Phase 1 and 2, the Payara project, the Yellowtail project, and Waru earlier this year. Those cumulatively amount to an investment commitment of well in excess of $40 billion US. And I know you probably appreciate the government's budget is only order of magnitude a tenth of that. So it's a massive investment for the country. I'm excited that we've been able to do that and that we have the kind of partnership where we believe in one another and that we're aligned around those investments. They will, we anticipate, of course, there's a wide range depending upon oil price, deliver by the end of this decade an order of magnitude of $10 billion US a year of revenues to the state. There's a wide band on that depending on how optimistic you are on oil price, but again, just as an order of magnitude, the sort of revenues that it will generate. I think Riyadh gave you some numbers. The number that I will anchor on is that 1 million barrels per day of production by 2028. That reflects 6 projects, so the 5 already sanctioned, and the Whiptail project is one that we're working on right now. We plan to submit a development plan to the government in October this year. So exciting times, a lot of development. that's founded on the Starbroek block. But what we're very cognizant about in this partnership is that the people of Guyana have now heard that they're rich, that we've discovered over 11 billion oil equivalent barrels of resource in the country, and that is worth tens of billions of dollars to the country. But there's a big gap between discovery of resource, defining the concept, agreeing with the government the development, making the investments, translating that into revenues, then the government taking it and taking those funds, investing in roads and infrastructure and bridges and hospitals and healthcare, and the people in the country really seeing the benefit through that. So we feel this is the challenge window. This is the period in which we have to ensure as many people as possible feel that this is a partnership development. And I certainly feel that. We are in Guyana to develop the resource of the country. They're not ExxonMobil, Hess, and CNOOC's resource. They are the nation's resource, the resource of the people of Guyana. We are there as a contract operator. That's literally the words that are used in the agreement that we operate to. We operate on behalf of the people of Guyana to develop the resource of the country. So what does that bring by way of obligation, and how do we fulfill that partnership? Very important, that economic impact. Now, to date already, although I said there's a lag in that revenue stream, already through the middle of this year, that production has delivered over $2.6 billion US into the Natural Resource Fund. A resource fund that I would tell you is actually one of the best in the world in the sense of transparency. There are many countries around the world that have established natural resource funds or sovereign wealth funds, but often or not the transparency between total revenues from the industry, whether it's mining or oil and gas, and what ends up in the natural resource fund is not always clear. I can assure you in this case, because we are the only operator, we know what the revenues are from our industry, that everything that is being generated for the country is going into that fund. So I think that is the first step in transparency and ensuring that the people of Guyana can benefit from those resources. Of course, then it is up to the government, the elected government, to appropriate that through the Parliament into projects for the country, and they have started to do that. Our role, though, is to ensure, as we develop the resource, as much of the investment money that we have that we can spend in Guyana, that we do that. And again, that brings us to partnerships. We have to partner with the government. They instituted the Local Content Act in December of 2021. Well, in 2017, ExxonMobil opened the Center for Local Business Development. We saw both the potential and the interest from local businesses and entrepreneurs, but also that there was a gap of experience, of knowledge of our industry, of the standards that we operate, from safety to quality, the way in which we go through procurement. We said, we need to help. There's no point in us putting out a tender and saying this is the standard you have to operate to if we don't help close the gap. So the center offers free training to any Guyanese business. Whether or not they operate in the oil and gas sector, it's available to them. They can come along, they can register, they can participate in training, everything, as I say, from safety through to how do you participate in a tender process. So it was a very strategic start, but I think it shows the intent with which we started, is we wanted to make this maximum benefit to the people of Guyana from the very beginning, during the investment phase. Now, happily, we've been able to continue that journey, and as of most recently, there are some 1,500 unique Guyanese businesses that are in some way working in support of our industry. And we've spent, you can see, over $900 million US in Guyana with those businesses. So it's progress. I would say there is always more to do, but in a country that had no oil and gas infrastructure, in fact, had very little industry that would typically support our industry, it's, on any benchmark of what's happened elsewhere in the world, it's phenomenal progress. But we're not resting on our laurels. We have a lot more to do. we have to continue to boost capacity. I would say our industry has sucked up a lot of the available talent in the country. We now have over 5,000 Guyanese that are working in our industry. They represent more than 60% of that workforce that is supporting our industry. But we are starting to see the limits of capability, just capacity in the community. And we're very mindful also that what we don't want to do is to end up with the so-called oil curse or the Dutch disease, that our industry takes over the economy, and after oil goes away, it's a cyclical business. It's a finite resource that one day will run out. That when that's done, we don't want the whole economy to be an oil economy. We want other parts of the economy to have taken off, to have benefited from this, and to sustain the future of Guyanese long into generations into the future. So this is a moment where we really need to benefit. We need to trigger training, build that capacity, not just for our industry, but of course we need to do that, but also for the wider economy. And we have a number of initiatives in that space. The ones that really directly affect our industry, for example, in Port Morant, we're investing in a training center that will lift some of the existing expertise that has been typically built for, say, the sugar industry, take technicians that already have some basic training and train them for the latest technology, for working offshore, for working in the offshore environment, so that they can be the operators offshore and the maintenance technicians of these world-class latest technologies. So that is one of the symbolic training institutions and commitments that we have. But we're working directly ourselves in the workforce that we train, also through the Centre for Local Business Development, but all of our contractors. We work with many large contractors, names that you will probably know: Halliburton, Schlumberger, the single buoy mooring. Stena is a European, in fact, a UK-based drilling company. 2 of the drill ships are Stena operated, owned and operated. So working with those major companies also to hire Guyanese and build up capacity. And of course, the last point I wanted to make on this page is also fostering those international partnerships. I've been so impressed with the ambition and commitment, and I would say the risk-taking of many Guyanese business people. Some are who are in the room. I look at one of my friends here, Faisal Khan, and the partnership he's set up with an American business that has worked in oil and gas in Louisiana for decades, and he has partnered with them in a way that is bringing technology and intellectual capability. They are coming in, investing and training, bringing machinery from the States and growing that capacity, that capability, which is ultimately good for the efficiency of our industry, but it's essential to enable Guyanese to benefit from this investment. And so it's a partnership. You know, we can only do so much, but we can also facilitate those partnerships where Guyanese businesses are enthusiastic and eager to do so and find the right partners and partnerships to accelerate this progress. A very strategic project for the country is gas energy. Electricity costs. Now, the UK has, over the last year and a half, has seen some, I'm sure many of you have seen your electricity bills shoot through the roof this last winter in particular. But Guyana has always really had that penalty of very high electricity costs. And that's because it's generated inefficiently, and it depends upon the importation of fuel oil and diesel from overseas and a very inefficient supply chain. Guyana sits at the end of a fuel supply chain. So electricity costs in Guyana have made it very challenging for industry to develop, because if you don't have competitive electricity or energy costs, it's very difficult to compete internationally. The gas energy project is a pivotal project in really transforming that equation. It will also reduce emissions. Because we're using gas from the Liza field, we're going to build a 12-inch pipeline all the way from offshore to onshore in Region 3, land at Crane in Region 3, and then about 20 kilometers south into the Wales estate, the old plantation. We've been doing the early works already. For what you can see is a graphic representation of what in future will be a natural gas liquid extraction and power generation plant, the latest combined cycle gas turbine power generation. It'll be capable of generating around 300 megawatts of power. Current grid generation is somewhere around 170 megawatts, so this will be able to displace the current oil-based generation from reciprocating engine generators with a much more reliable and cleaner signal electricity that will be tied into the distribution grid. We're targeting to have everything ready by the end of 24. There's a lot of work to be done by that point, but everybody understands the sooner that we can get this project online, the sooner that the majority of the people that are in the country that are connected to the grid will begin to benefit from. The government is committed to halving the cost of power in the country and then also significantly reducing emissions. And of course, there's a balance of payments for the country, no longer having to import fuel, using the nation's own resource to generate that power. So this is really a transformational project, and we're excited to be able to advance that. Social investments. We recognize the significance of the role, but also the opportunity that we have in Guyana. And wherever ExxonMobil operates, and indeed our co-venturers, Hess and CNOOC, we believe that we are part of the community, that we're there for the long term. We're going to be in Guyana for decades to come by the nature of our industry. We want to contribute to that community, to be part of that community. And we do that in many ways. But we've made some significant statements, if you like, commitments in the country that reflect the opportunity space that we also enjoy. The first of those is a joint commitment by the Starbroek co-venturers, by ourselves, Hess and CNOOC. It's called the Greater Guyana Initiative. It's $100 million that we've committed to the sustainable development of the country. So nothing to do with supporting the development of our industry, but supporting capacity building and health and welfare, community building across the country that will be part of sustaining the longer term future of the economy and that community development. So that's the first one. Also point out that the ExxonMobil Foundation, which is a charitable part of ExxonMobil, has made some large commitments in the country. Two main areas that we focused on. The first of those is the environment and a large project with Iwakrama, the rainforest. But that's looking at how does the environmental economy develop. And so the foundation has sponsored some $8-9 million worth of effort in that space. That project is ongoing. The other area that the foundation is very keen to support is education, and particularly for women, empowering women in the community. I mean, the statistics and the research are clear that if you educate women and give them independence in the community, the community is better for that. Their families are better for that. Children typically learn more and are better educated, and community is stronger. So the foundation has a number of projects, has partnered in Guyana, in fact, with the Cherie Blair Foundation on some education projects in the country. And excited to say that, in fact, next week, Cherie and Tony Blair are going to be in Guyana looking at some of those projects and how they're progressing and what are the future opportunities. So a lot of work going on. I'd be remiss if I didn't also highlight some of the things that one of our partners, Hess, has been doing, making very significant commitments in the country. One of those is around carbon credits and the work the country has done to preserve the rainforest and to ensure that that is being properly measured and stewarded over time. And indeed, Guyana leads the world on that, on defining carbon deforestation avoidance credits. and Hess Corporation has made the largest single commitment in the world to purchase those kind of carbon credits in a deal that's worth a minimum of $750 million over a 10-year period to the country. So very significant. And the other area that Hess is supporting is through Mount Sinai, which is a very large medical institution in the United States, but works internationally and supports developing countries in the advancement of their medical system. And so they are doing some work with the government on the medical system in Guyana, and I believe may even be part of building a new hospital in the country. So substantial commitments. The one which is most exciting to us is represented in the pictures. We love sport too. We support a number of activities, many youth and children's activities, but we're also the proud sponsor of the Guyana Warriors. The CPL is coming up next month, and I'm crossing fingers, toes, and everything available, and I'll be out cheering them at the matches every day, hoping that this is the year that the Warriors can win the CPL. With that, let me wrap up. I look forward to hearing the questions that are on your mind, but I really just wanted to thank you for coming out and giving me the opportunity to share our perspective, and hopefully you get the sense of commitment that ExxonMobil has to Guyana and the opportunity that is in front of Guyana, in front of us as investors, but the partnership that we think is essential to make that a success for everybody involved. Thank you.